map of India, the diversity is striking and extremely interesting. Each state has had its own journey, political, social, economical, and historical. Events and actions of the past have played a pivotal role in shaping what each part of India is today. But if there is one region that invites a great deal of commentary, analysis, discussions, and scrutiny, is this part, the Hindi Heartland, the states of Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, and Uttarakhand. Geographically, it is huge. It's almost 38% of India's total area. It is hugely populated as well, accounting for more than 40% of India's population. Politically, it's an important region as well. UP, for instance, sends the highest Lok Sabha MPs, that is 80. It's often said that the road to Delhi goes through Lucknow. In fact, out of the 15 prime ministers India has seen, 8 have come from the Hindi Heartland. For those staying outside the belt like myself, there are some common notions that immediately come to mind. That this is a poor region, people are not well educated, there are no jobs, and this huge Hindi-speaking population falls behind on critical social indicators. But why is the Hindi Heartland what it is today? What is its past? How big a role has caste and religion played in shaping the present of the Hindi Heartland? What are the changes this region has gone through on all fronts, and what to expect in the future? This is the focus of a new book. It is titled The Hindi Heartland, A Study. It is written by Ghazala Wahab. She is an award-winning senior journalist, co-founder of Force magazine, and a noted author. Her latest book, The Hindi Heartland, has been published by Arab Book Company. It is an independent publishing firm promoted by Rupa Publications India. Also, before we get into the interview, a special thanks to the team at Rupa Publications who was kind enough to send us a copy of this book, The Hindi Heartland. Now, this book serves as the perfect guide for understanding the nuances of this region of India. This conversation that we had with Ghazala Wahab a few hours back is an enriching one, so do watch it till the very end. Hello and welcome, I'm Shubham Chauhan. Let's get started.
Embarrassment that I have faced is being made fun of, that, oh, so you are from the Hindi belt, or pejoratively speaking, you are from the cow belt. So a certain mindset was already pre-existing in most people who are not from this region, and I have been stereotyped because of the place where I come from. So this is something which is really so deeply entrenched that I don't think it is Hindi belt specific. It is just a way of identifying people and telling them where they belong, what their position even in that small group of people, or even in that small community of professionals is.
So contrary to what many people think, you're right that Hindi as a language was the least unifying factor when it came to this region. And
knowledge of Hindi was critical for government employment. So there was a huge thrust on learning this language, and in the Hindi belt region, people did that because there was a lot of similarity between their own languages and the new language which was being thrust upon them. Playground of the RSS was always the Hindi belt. First it was Madhya Pradesh, and from Madhya Pradesh it moved upwards towards UP and Bihar, subsequently to Bihar. So this region has seen a lot of politicking, a lot of social and political pulls by the religious groups, which is why when we for BJP capturing this region, and because of through BJP for the RSS to make inroads in this region has been of greatest importance. The majority of people in India, and it's not just the Hindi belt, but outside the Hindi belt also, they seem invested in the idea of asserting the Hindu identity. See, when we talk of secularism, we say it's very important that India be a secular country, India remain a secular country. But the truth is actually for the majority population in India, for Hindus, secularism is a luxury. It's an ideological position. But for the minorities, it's a criticality.
Ghazala ma'am, thank you so much for taking out the time and speaking with us. Firstly, congratulations on the book. It was an absolutely insightful read, to say the least. One of the reviews, in fact, on the cover says that this is a ready reckoner. And I completely agree with that, because I think sitting here in Mumbai, you have a lot of misconceptions about the Hindi heartland and how states in the Hindi heartland operate. And it busted a lot of myths, in fact, as I went along covering that. So thank you so much, and congratulations on the book. Let's
Thank
start
you
with.
so much, and thank you for asking me to talk to you here. I'm very happy to be here.
My pleasure, ma'am. And let's start with what drew you to sort of write about this Sindhi pattern, because whatever I could research, whatever I could find, there's very limited literature of the kind that you've written in terms of something that covers so many aspects of such a diverse region. What drew you? What was that one aspect, or more than one, that drew you to write about the subject in the way that you did?
After my first book had come out, Born a Muslim, actually the second book, Born a Muslim came out, my editor asked me if I could elaborate. There was a chapter in Born a Muslim which dealt with insecurities of the Muslims in India. And she asked me if there was a possibility of elaborating on that into a book form. But I was not very keen to dwell only on communal violence in India at that point. And then the conversation went back and forth, and finally we zeroed in on UP, and it gradually expanded to the entire Hindi belt. Now, when I was conceptualizing the book, I was thinking about what is the objective of this book. Why should I be writing a book on the Hindi belt region? Who will read it, and what will that reader get out of this book? So what should it be? Why should it be written at all? That's when the scope kept expanding, and I thought that maybe one of the big challenges, I'm from this region, and one of the big challenges that our embarrassment that I have faced is being made fun of, that, oh, so you are from the Hindi belt, or pejoratively speaking, you are from the cow belt. So a certain mindset was already pre-existing in most people who are not from this region, and I have been stereotyped because of the place where I come from, which is something I never liked. So I thought if I could talk about this region in a manner which locates its presence in the historic continuum, why this region attracted so many people, because when we are talking of invaders, when we talk about external influences, the gateway was this region. So why everybody was attracted to this region, why they came here, what was the influence they left on this region, and how this region eventually gave birth to the whole idea of, or the popular idea of India as we know it, whether it is through films or culture or language, everything. So I thought that was how I thought of the book in my mind, and also to finally answer the question that why it is so backward socially and economically today, and what possibly we can do to rectify that.
Right. And it has come out beautifully because you've interviewed people, you've been on ground, you've added your own experiences, anecdotes, and of course, the facts as they are. Like I said at the very beginning, the book is vast. It is divided into 5 sections. You look at geography, caste, economy, medieval and modern history, British colonialism, freedom struggle, and the post-independence era. I want to start with caste. Now, politically, numerically, a lot has been talked about. कितने कास्ट है यूपी में, कितने कास्ट बिहार में है, who is how many percentage, and politically what is the weight that they carry. And you write that, and I want to sort of step aside from that and look at a more broader picture. You write that in the Hindi belt particularly, while religion is the predominant determinant of caste, it is not always the only one. And then you recollect an anecdote from your schooling days back in 1989 that showed what you call the subtle cruelty of caste assertion. Then you go on to write that caste-conscious Indians seem to be stuck in a time loop. What happened in a classroom in 1989 had happened many times in the past and continues to happen. Tell us about that incident from your school, and for someone watching this from outside of the Hindi heartland, how significant does the caste system play out on a day-to-day basis among individuals part of that region?
If you recall, when I narrate this incident in the book, before I come to that incident, I narrated somebody else's experience also, which was slightly similar to that experience which I had. And that person's experience was at a place of her work. So basically, what happens is that you identify a person by the caste, and then you expose that person in front of others who probably wouldn't know that person's caste. So in my class, what happened was my teacher, he asked this girl to stand up in front of everybody else, asked her full name, so her caste name was then known to everybody, asked her what her parents did, what her father did, how much she scored in her school examinations. So all of this was aimed at isolating her in the rest of the class. So everybody, all the classmates knew exactly that this person has come here because of the quota. And that then further led to her isolation amongst the peer group because nobody else would talk to her then. So this is something I experienced when I was in my first year college. And subsequently, whenever I have met people, I have heard similar stories from others. And I've narrated two incidents in the book also. One experienced this in a media house and another experienced in the university. So this is something which is really, really so deeply entrenched that I don't think it is Hindi belt specific. It is just a way of identifying people and telling them where they belong, what their position in, even in that small group of people or even in that small community of professionals is.
Right. Now, let's move to the other aspect, which you've again mentioned it in great detail, is the economy. Now, when when you ask someone, particularly outside of the Hindi world, what does this region of India stand for? And one immediate characteristic that comes out is poverty. गरीब लोग बहुत है. यूपी बिहार जाओ, आपको गांव देहात में you'll find a lot of poor people. बीमारू, as one of the acronym goes. Now you write that over the years, especially post the 90s, manufacturing has been disincentivized. You write that this has left the traditional industry on the verge of slow extinction. And for a region that until 3 centuries ago was known worldwide for its economic vibrancy and superior craft, this would be tragic. The absence of wealth is not the only sign of poverty. Erosion of legacy is also a measure of penury. For a region that was so rich, why is the Hindi heartland economically where it is right now, where manufacturing, like you said, has been disincentivized?
Thank you for that question, Shubham. See, when the British East India Company was exploiting India, they de-incentivized industrialization of India because that did not serve their interest. They extracted natural resources from here, whether they were agricultural resources or they were mining resources, and they brought back manufactured goods into India. So India was both the source of raw material as well as the market for their manufactured products. They did now when the industrial revolution happened in Europe, first Britain and then the other parts of Europe. That completely changed the way manufacturing was being done until then. The world over, manufacturing then was a domain of small scale sectors, mostly hand manufacturing or what we call handicraft. But with the industrial revolution, the process of manufacturing shifted to industrial processes. Technology became a big thing. But the British did not invest in that technology in India or in incubating that technology in India. So our source remained hand crafted items, handcrafted manufacturing, which was time consuming, and because of time consuming labor, it was expensive. So even after independence, as the world was moving towards industrial or industrially produced goods, our goods were no longer competitive because, and the government also did not support this local industry. It did not treat it as a national asset. It realized that this industry was no longer competitive, and the government's focus was on mass scale production. So, handcrafted industry, which was the main asset of the Hindi heartland, whether it's footwear or weaving or tie and dye, or carving, wood carving, metal, all of that was given a short shrift in favor of large scale industrial production, which was all set up outside the Hindi belt. mostly in the coastal towns of, let's say, Bombay, parts of Gujarat. So these were the centers which were the center of industry even during the colonial period, and the government continued to promote these centers for industrial production of goods. So, to give a small example, Indian textile was one of our biggest source of foreign exchange earning before colonialism. After independence, the government focused on large scale industrial textiles, polyester, instead of focusing on our homegrown textiles, which were cotton, silk. We were working with natural fabrics. Now they have become luxury goods, so people are going back to handloom as luxury items. They're very expensive, but the masses still can't afford them. So the process of deindustrialization from the Hindi belt was the consequence of government's focus on indulging or investing in mass scale production, which is probably required for a country the size of India. But at the same time, there was also a requirement that the government should have invested in what was our key asset, our handicraft or our handlooms, which the government did not do. The other thing which is our bane today, and which is why manufacturing all across India is our biggest weakness, is our lack of R&D, lack of investment in R&D. We do not own any technologies. We do not have any USP in any technology. Our biggest industries, even today, are doing license production, whether it is in the private sector or in the public sector. We buy technology or we adapt technologies from outside. We do not own the IPR to them, and we just mass produce them. Assembly line production is what we are doing. So this is one of the reasons why, as a manufacturing nation, we are not even amongst the uh, you know people claim we are among the top 5 in the world, but I don't think that claim is borne by evidence, because now when big companies are trying to shift their manufacturing from China into India, they're facing a lot of problem. And Hindi heartland, because of the history of both colonialism as well as of early post independence politics, which was very divisive, has borne the brunt of this skewed policy making.
Right. Let's then shift focus to a topic that's been in news recently: language, Hindi, and in parts of in Maharashtra, for instance, where there was an attempt to impose Hindi, and the people here say कि यूपी बिहार और झारखंड की भाषा हमारे ऊपर. Why do you want to sort of impose that? In fact, I did not know that when you write that this was the least unifying factor, contrary to what many people think. You write that Hindi as a language was the least unifying factor when it came to this region. And in another chapter, you've given 4 reasons as to why Hindi continues to struggle as a language. Can you shed more light on the role of Hindi, that is, as a language widely spoken in this part of India?
See, language or learning of any language, knowledge of any language in India has always been linked with employment. Because as I mentioned earlier, our biggest source of employment today is the services. And this has been so since the colonial times. So when the British came and they incentivized learning of English because that could give you employment, so everybody wanted to learn English. And after the English, they looked at the secondary language which could give them employment. At that point, it was Persian, which was slowly being phased out. But after independence, the government linked Hindi, which government of India at that point thought could be the Indian answer to English. If the British had one language, why shouldn't we have one language too? This was completely ignorant of the fact that the British is a monolith society. I mean, it's one language speaking society. India has always been a multilingual, multicultural, multi-ethnic society. Forget multi-religious. So here we could never have had one single language. So it was actually very foolish of those who thought we needed to have one language as a source of unity among our people. Our strength lied in our diversity. So after independence, the government linked Hindi language to government employment. knowledge of Hindi was critical for government employment. So there was a huge thrust on learning this language. And in the Hindi belt region, people did that because there was a lot of similarity between their own languages and the new language which was being thrust upon them. Because there was a lot of the roots were similar, the vocabulary was similar, because they sourced their vocabulary from similar other languages. So it was easy for this region to adapt to Hindi more easily than for the other regions like Maharashtra or Bengal or Tamil Nadu, because their languages also had very strong literary background, heritage. So they did not want to adapt to this one language, and this has been a problem all the time. From 47 onwards, this language problem has been there. Now, what is happening is after all the thrust to Hindi, English remains the language of employment because of globalization, because of the new technologies which are coming in, whether it's IT or whatever. So for whatever you want to do in life, English becomes a primary source of or primary means of achieving your employment goals. So Hindi, then in that case, because it has been artificially imposed on this region, so it becomes nobody's language. So a person who now claims Hindi as his or her own language at home speaks a different version of supposed Hindi, though they do not call it a version of Hindi, they call it their own language, they call it their own mother tongue, whether it's Awadhi or Maithili or Braj Bhasha. But
Right.
there is some kind of understanding between the languages. If you are speaking Braj and you are a Hindi speaker, you would understand. So you can understand these languages. So it seems that they are all dialects when they are not. So this is one
Right.
of the reasons why nobody reads or writes in Hindi, even those who claim that they read and write Hindi, or who write on government forms they call Hindi, or list Hindi as their mother tongue. But it is actually at home, the mother tongue is something else. And
Right.
so this is one of the reasons that Hindi has now become a language which is associated with backwardness or illiteracy also. So that if you are an educated person, you would be talking in English, or you would be your primary source of entertainment would be English and not Hindi.
Right. Another sort of supplementary question to that, and here's where a part of religion also comes in. You mentioned that how over a period of time, Hindi came to be associated with Hindu, and then Urdu as a language became Muslim. And this is the question that I always had. At what point in time did this segregation happen? You've written about how it started, how this process of language and getting together all these dialects like Maithili, Awadhi. But at what point did religion come into this, where it became Urdu is equal to Muslims and Hindi is equal to Hindus?
See, they both come from the same parent language, Hindavi. And this was a language which was a language of the streets, because as long as the Mughals were in power in India, the court language was Persian, and the language of the street for the common people was Hindavi, which was drawn from various other languages. And this, when the British came, they encountered three languages in India. They encountered Persian, which was spoken by the elites. They encountered Hindavi, which was like a lingua franca, where people were speaking in that on the streets among themselves. And then they encountered several regional languages, which people of various different regions would be speaking among themselves. So obviously they were not used to multiplicity of languages. So they, for their own personnel, they started after the 1857, when the Mughals were defeated and British India, the East India Company was the bona fide rulers of this region. they, for their own personal, they started a language school where they could train their own people who were coming from England uh, to get the basics of administrating India correct. So whether there were laws here, the various religious laws, what laws that govern the Hindus, the laws that govern the Muslims, and so on, as well as languages. So they realized that a lot of Hindus, especially Brahmins, because the power amongst the Hindus even then vested with the Brahmins or the upper caste, they used even within Hindu, they used a lot of Sanskrit words, and Muslims would use a lot of Persian or Arabic words. So they realized that within this one universe of Hindu, there existed two different strands of language which people of different religions preferred. And that is where they decided that they needed to create a language for Muslims and they needed to create a separate language for Hindus, because in any case they were phasing out Persian. Persian was no longer, Persian was spoken earlier, was spoken by everybody because that was a court language. So within Hindu, they divided this language between Hindus and Muslims, and from there, this division or this sense of identifying yourself with with a language also dawned upon Indians, and they realized that if they want British jobs, the government jobs, one, they have to learn English, and two, for in the government to people interface, they needed a local language. So at that point, that local language was Hindui, which could be written in Nagri or could be written in Nastaliq. But as the registers started getting separated at by the British at Fort William College, the nationalists also felt that why should we speak the language which Muslims are speaking? And Muslims felt, why should we were the rulers of this country? Why should we speak the language which, at once upon a time, people who were subordinate to us, they are speaking. So that is how the religious divisions came about. And by the time we approached independence or partition, the language was partitioned to.
Right. And we're seeing it play out today in these times as well. These questions are so recurring. Let's build on that point of religion, because I think that was one of the most insightful parts of the book for me when you've described at length. You've gone through so many decades of different rulers, be it, then came the British, and then, of course, the post-independence era. Now, in current times, what we are seeing play out is there for everyone to see this assertion of the Hindu identity. And not just that, on the other hand, telling the Muslims that you are not equal to us. When you wrote at length about the British rule, their divide and rule policy. Then in the Congress years under Nehru, where there was a phase where Nehru did not want to associate himself or his party with the Muslim League. And now we are at a stage where you have the right-wing ecosystem starting from the ruling dispensation, talking about it, making it a mainstream issue. If you had to assess this trajectory from the British to the Congress era to now, where even violence is justified, and you have the mobs going on a rampage without any impunity, how would you see this trajectory of religion and the Hindu-Muslim dynamics that we've seen play out over so many decades?
See, until the British came in India, religious identities were very diffused. People did not really identify themselves with their religion so much, especially in India, as they identified themselves with their region, with their caste identity. So this diffusion also led to a lot of adaptation of each other's cultures and practices. If you see, I've given a lot of examples in the book where both Hindus and Muslims roughly had similar cultural practices, roughly had similar eating habits, habits of celebrating festivals, seasonal festivals in a similar manner. But when the British came and they started to do the first census in India, they had very fixed questions to which they needed very specific answers. That is when the identities started getting firmed up, then they were asking people to identify their religion, and then forcing people to identify their religions by ticking on certain boxes. That if you do these things, these many practices, if you follow, then you fall in this back in this column, and if you do these practices, then you fall in this column. And that is when the religious identities started to get really hardened. Post 1857, another thing that happened was that probably this sort of a segment within the Hindus was already based there, but it was latent. So this segment of asserting uh, Hindu identity, or the resurgence of Hindu identity, grew and found traction, uh, because British also encouraged it. And this this assertion of Hindu identity then led to uh, further marginalization. See, the 1857, for some reason, British decided that the perpetrators of that revolt or that violence, massacres, were all Muslims, though that was not historically correct. But once that was decided and the as a resurgence of Hindu identity happened, then they both sort of fused together to work against one identified villain, and which were the Muslims. So then this division, the religious division, started with that. If you, I have, in the chapter on colonialism, I have mentioned the occurrence of of first violence between communities on the basis of religion, which happened in, I think, 1880s or something. So all of this started happening because British, probably at one point, they did not think actively in terms of divide and rule, but then they realized that this works better for them, playing one community against another. So this created two very distinct community identities and rivalry between these two community identities. So it added to the Muslim insecurity, which in any case was there after 1857, but it kept on building on that. And then the Muslims also consolidated themselves to safeguard their interests as against the Hindu interests. So this religious division, I think, by the beginning of the 20th century, was very, very pronounced. And this led to the first partition of Bengal, as we know. And when the freedom movement started, even then the consciousness of your different religions was very, very prominent. So when the Congress started uh, bothering the British government, they propped up the Muslim League. Muslim League was propped up by the British. So they propped up the Muslim League as a rival to the Congress Party. So they have been playing one against the other right till 1847, when they humored one against the other and ensured that there was never any meeting ground. In any case, by this time, a lot of acrimony had grown between the two communities. Violence had started after 18. I think the whole decade of 1920s was full of religious violence between the two communities. That was the time the RSS came into being. Late 1920s, Jamaat Islami, Tablighi Jamaat, all these organizations, they came into existence. So this religious division could never be overcome by any other concept or any other unifying factor, even a factor as unifying as colonialism. I mean, people could have come together as they did in the non-cooperation movement under Gandhi. So they kind of subsumed their religious identities to come together to fight the British. And then thereafter, I think in Quit India movement, there was a brief spark where again the communities came together to fight against the British. But these were very far and few in movements or moments in our history. The religious divisions continued to grow, and post-independence, partition was the worst manifestation of this religious hatred. And post-independence, because there was a Muslim Pakistan, so many people within the Congress were convinced that we should be a Hindu India. Why should India be a Hindu country when the division of the country has happened on grounds of religion? So I think the Congress Party's politics in the early years after independence was also trying to play a balancing act, doing a balancing act between these various pulls and pressures within the party. There was a big group which supported uh, Hindu nationalism or identifying India as a Hindu nation, and there were those who wanted India to be a secular country. And I think it has
But
continued that way even today.
one thing that just came to my mind when you were answering that bit. Um, Today, when in again, I'm contextualizing it for our viewers to sort of understand where all of this is coming from because everything is linked in a way. Today, when a party like the BJP that says that we are the party for the Hindus, when they go out and play the Hindu Muslim card as they do politically, they find a lot of takers for that rhetoric, for their communal narrative in this part of India than perhaps any other part of India. South, of course, isn't doesn't accept this plank of the BJP. Is this what you just said? This decades of this sort of chain reaction, one thing happening after another. What we are seeing play out today in the minds of the people, that people do like that narrative. They want that extra charged up, hyper nationalistic narrative that they buy from the BJP. So, is this a result of what has happened over the years, or do you think there's some other cause to that when it comes to the Hindi heartland?
See, that is where the importance of Hindi heartland lies. This Hindi belt, especially the state of Uttar Pradesh, has been the center of all religious movements in India, whether they're the Hindu religion or Muslim religion. Uh, it has been the source of all religious ideas, ideologies, philosophies, as well as sites, religious sites, pilgrimage sites. So this region has seen the interplay between the two religions, Islam and Hinduism. It has seen how they coexisted and benefited from each other, as well as it has seen vicious violence perpetuated by one religion against another. So this has been the playground of these two religious identities. When I'm talking about RSS, even though it was founded in Maharashtra, and the movements like Jamaat Islami and Tablighi Jamaat came in this part of the Hindi belt in UP. But the main playground of the RSS was always the Hindi belt. First, it was Madhya Pradesh, and from Madhya Pradesh, it moved upwards towards UP and Bihar, subsequently to Bihar. So this region has seen a lot of politicking, a lot of social and political pulls by the religious groups, which is why when for BJP capturing this region, and because of through BJP for the RSS to make inroads in this region has been of greatest importance. It has spent or expended so much of its energy and its resources in expanding in this region. Another reason why RSS thought that it was important to be present here was the history of Mughal rule, because this was the center of the Mughal rule for the longest period of time. I mean, there were periods where the Mughal or Muslim rule, not Mughal, sorry, the Muslim rule expanded to other parts of India also. But for the longest time, the center of Muslim power resided in the Hindi belt, whether it was Delhi or Agra. So this has been an area of contestation for the RSS because they wanted to first assert their presence in this region, which is why uh, this region has been home to a lot of violence. I mean, not at par with Gujarat. Gujarat takes the cake, but outside Gujarat, this region has been witness to a lot of violence. And forget about large scale violence. The everyday, uh, the everyday divisions which you see
Yes.
in this region, you don't see in south of India. The reason for that is not so much of RSS also, but also of because of the assertion of Muslims. See, for a very long, until the coming to power of the present BJP government in 2014, there has been a certain degree of Muslim assertion also in this region. because of maybe the land. They have been landholders in many parts of UP. In Bihar also, you have a certain amount of land holdings with the Muslims. So there has been resistance to being treated as second-class citizens. That has changed now since 2014. But before that, it hadn't changed. I mean, there was still some pockets of assertion. When we said that there is a communal riot taking place, in many parts, it was actually a riot. There was two-way violence. It was not just one-way violence perpetuated by one community over others. So that is one of the reasons why this region has seen so much of strife, because for want of better phrase, Muslims were refusing to accept their position as second-class citizens. So there was resistance. Whenever there is resistance, there will be friction. So that is one of the reasons why you've seen that happening in this part and not in other parts of India.
Right. Right. Now, we've spoken about the past, we've elaborated on so many aspects in such a short span of time. Let's look at the future. What do you see as the future of the Hindi heartland? Do you see things changing, or given the circumstances, given the regimes that we are seeing in each of the state, in fact, be it Madhya Pradesh, be it Uttar Pradesh, be it Rajasthan, do you see things improving? Or do you see things in all aspects, whichever aspect you want to focus on? Do you see that is the graph is only going to go down, unfortunately, if that is what you think? So, how would you see the future?
See, I hate to say this, that I am not very optimistic about the future. I always would want to believe that I am a hopeful person, and I hope things change. And I do end the book on a hopeful note, hoping that things would change and people would realize the importance of coexistence and importance of uh, living in harmony. But the way things are moving at the moment, the way things stand at the moment, I am not very hopeful. Uh, and my lack of hope stems from the fact that the majority of people in India, and it's not just the Hindi belt, but outside the Hindi belt also, they seem invested in the idea of asserting the Hindu identity. See, when we talk of secularism, we say it's very important that India be a secular country, India remain a secular country. But the truth is, actually, for the majority population in India, for Hindus, secularism is it's a luxury. It's an ideological position. But for the minorities, it's a criticality. Their life depends on it. So for them, if India has to be secular, because if they have to survive, and if they have to survive and thrive, then it has to be a secular country. But for Hindus, it doesn't matter. If it's a secular country, it's an ideological position, but it doesn't affect their everyday life. So in this widening gap of our equation or our relations to secularism, for one, it's a subject of discussion. For other, it's a criticality. That is where I think our idea of a diverse country has fallen through this crack. We feel that if there are monolithic countries all around us, if there's there's a Muslim Pakistan, there's a Muslim Bangladesh, and all the Middle East is all Muslim countries. So why shouldn't there be a Hindu country? People who talk like this, they do not understand that in most of these places, there is uniformity of ethnicity, uniformity of religion comes from the uniformity of ethnicity. Pakistan has a little bit of diversity between Punjabis and Sindhis and Baluchis, but not too much. Punjabis are overwhelmingly dominant on the other two countries, and they try to dominate the other two communities, which is why Pakistan is facing so many problems. But the countries which have survived and they are thriving despite being a monolith identity, despite their monolith identity, are actually a monolith country. Like China it's the vastly Han Chinese. They don't have, Han Chinese are the majority in China. It's a single language country. But India has not been like this. India has always been a nation of multiple states, each tracing a different ethnic roots, with different languages, different religious practices. Even Hinduism, as it's practiced in various parts of India, is very diverse. It is not a monolith Hinduism as RSS would want everybody to believe. So, in a country this diverse, we have to appreciate that others are different from us, but that doesn't make the other an adversary. Our best part of our history was when we did not treat each other as adversaries, and when we lived together in harmony, when there was economic interdependence, when communities worked together, even if they were living separately. I mean, it doesn't mean that you eat in the same plate. It doesn't mean you intermarry. You don't want to do that, don't do that. But at least you do not treat others as a perpetual enemy or a fifth columnist. Ideally, that should be the case. That should happen, ideally. But I am not very hopeful, because I think the majority is not invested in this idea.
Right. Hope and unity in diversity, the word I think that should be underlined. There's so much to, in fact, talk about the book, but I'll have to end things here. Ghazala ma'am, thank you so much for taking out the time. And to our audience, in fact, you can buy this book. It's available online. You ask me, I would say go to a bookstore and buy it, but do get your hands on this absolutely insightful book that Ghazala ma'am has written. It'll give you the A to Z of what this region, this fascinating region that everyone loves to talk about over a cup of tea, is actually all about. So again, we'll end it there. Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining us here on HW. Thank you.
Thank you so much.